Okay, let's start. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you coming to the Faculty of Science and Engineering Thursday lunchtime seminar series. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Hansika, who's a master's candidate in the faculty, and he's going to tell us about his work, which is Migratory Patterns and Interchange Between Breeding Grounds by Humpback Whales. Over to you, Hansika. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming. My name is Hansika Baduge, and I shall be presenting this seminar on the migratory patterns and interchange between breeding grounds by humpback whales visiting Hervey Bay. This seminar is an outcome of my master's research project, which I undertook from July last year to February this year on these majestic long-traveled animals. Before I begin, I acknowledge and pay respect to the people of the Gumbaynggirr Nation on whose land we work, meet, and study. I recognize the significant role the past and future elders play in the life of the university and the region. I am mindful that within and without the buildings, the land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. In this seminar, I shall give you a brief background of my research and give you the aims of this project before moving on to the method used in this study. After that, I shall share with you my observations regarding interchange between Hervey Bay and different regions, as well as the sex differences in the migration patterns. Towards the end, I shall give a brief summary of the project's major findings and give acknowledgements to certain individuals and organizations that helped make this project possible. Then I shall give a short list of references that I used in this seminar before opening the floor to you all for questions. The humpback whale is a cosmopolitan species found in all oceans worldwide. Currently, there are 14 distinct populations recognized, as you can see on this map here. And most of these populations undertake yearly migrations between their polar feeding grounds in the summer and their tropical breeding grounds during the winter. However, previous studies have found evidence of whales from different populations in the South Pacific migrating to different breeding grounds besides their usual ones, ranging from Western Australia to French Polynesia. There are two Australian populations, one breeding off the coast of Western Australia, designated D, and the other of the east coast of Australia, designated E1. The E1 population travels between the Great Barrier Reef and an area called Antarctic Area 5, their main feeding grounds, encompassing 130 degrees east to 170 degrees west at Antarctica. During their southern migration, the E1 a large portion of the E1 population diverts temporarily into Hervey Bay. And Hervey Bay has been found to be a rest stop for mainly females. What is generally known of large migrating female mammals is that they tend to display more site fidelity, while males tend to sometimes travel to other breeding grounds to better their chances of reproduction. With that in mind, the aims of this project were to determine the degree of interchange between Hervey Bay and the visited breeding grounds, confirmed bias towards one sex in breeding dispersal. And given that connections between New Zealand and East Australia have been previously documented, determine the degree of use of New Zealand as a migratory corridor by these particular whales. Now, this study was based on photo identification. Photo identification is a long established practice in whale study, and in this case, typically involves the comparison of various fluke photos, looking specifically at differences in pigmentation patterns on the flukes, differences in serration patterns on the fluke's trailing edges, and differences in knot shape, among other features. These differences are used to distinguish between different humpback whale individuals and also to match sightings of unique whales together. Such as is the case of a whale named Kumari, a female, first sighted in 2011 and then sighted in 2013. Take a moment to note in both pictures the big black line mark on the left fluke and other similar looking markings on the right fluke. Also have a look at the trailing edge of the left fluke, and you will find that they look rather similar. Now, thanks to this technique, extensive photo identification catalogues have been compiled and are being updated in many regions. Of course, management of these catalogues started out being done by hand, but as these catalogues grew in size, with the addition of new individuals over the years, so did the effort of manually matching photos and managing these catalogues. And as you may imagine, this would make for a rather time-consuming process. I should know, I once had to match manta ray photos in this manner. And let me tell you right now, it was not a cakewalk. To combat this difficulty, there have been recent developments in online photo ID databases utilizing artificial intelligence assistant matching of photos. And this development has helped to streamline and shorten the process of photo identification. Within a minute or so, you can find a match for a fluke photo with a whale in the database, if it exists. Happy Whale is one such recently developed platform that has amassed a vast number of records from both research organizations and citizen scientists. Happy Whale has achieved an above 90% success rate in matching fluke photos and was therefore used in this study. Now I shall take you through the method used in this study. This project was started by uploading into Happy Whale 3,339 individual fluke photos taken by the Oceania project, a non-profit research organization founded by Doctors Wally and Trish Franklin, focused on humpback whales visiting Hervey Bay in Queensland. I matched their fluke photos and associated data with previously uploaded records in Hervey Bay and other region catalogues. Now, as you can see on this map over here, these various numbers denote the current catalogue sizes of these regions in Happy Whale. Apart from Hervey Bay, New Zealand, and Raoul Island, which are migratory corridors and stops, the other regions listed here are the breeding grounds. And also the blue dots that you see on the map are the sightings locations of the whales used in this study. Now, out of these uploaded photos, 889 whales were entered as new individuals, as no prior match could be found for them. Now, after the upload at the time, the Hervey Bay catalogue in Happy Whale contained 7,795 unique individuals with 18,735 related sightings. However, there was some same day and same year records for some individuals. Therefore, after validation for this and the signing of a data sharing agreement, the data set used in this study contained 7,791 unique individuals with 14,754 sightings between 1985 and 2021. The individuals' sightings histories were collectively analyzed using R to determine the numbers of whales sighted in multiple regions and multiple seasons. The degrees of interchange between Hervey Bay and visited breeding grounds, as well as New Zealand, were calculated using this particular equation, which is basically the inverse of the Peterson capture-recapture index that has been previously used by other researchers for similar purposes. In this equation, M12 is the number of matches between Hervey Bay and these other regions. N1 is Hervey Bay's catalogue size, and N2 is the other region's catalogue size. To test the null hypothesis of the whales distributing evenly across all breeding grounds, a chi-squared test of goodness of fit was performed. The result of this test showed that the observed number of matches between Hervey Bay and these other regions differed significantly from the expected number of matches, meaning that whales visiting Hervey Bay did not distribute evenly across the breeding grounds. Now, this table displays the catalogue sizes of all these regions and the observed number of matches and expected number of matches, as well as the calculated interchange indices. We shall look at this in more depth in the following slides. Now I shall take you through my observations regarding the interchange between Hervey Bay and the different regions, starting with Western Australia. In this study, 7 matches were found between Hervey Bay and Western Australia, though the level of interchange between these two regions was quite low, as you can see in the table highlighted. Before this study, there has been only one published photo identification match between East Australia and Western Australia. This particular whale was sighted at East Australia in 1988 and subsequently sighted in Western Australia 8 years later. Satellite tagging evidence has also revealed travels of E1 whales into Antarctic Area 4, reported to be the main feeding grounds of the Western Australian breeding population. Therefore, this study supports the conclusion that there is interchange between East Australia and Western Australia, though perhaps to a very low degree. Now to the other side of the continent, There were 343 matches between Hervey Bay and the Great Barrier Reef. And the reef had the highest interchange index out of all the breeding regions. This result was expected, of course, seeing as the Great Barrier Reef is considered to be the main breeding ground of the E1 population. The majority of Hervey Bay humpback whales sighted in the Great Barrier Reef, which amounted to 305 sightings of 288 individuals, was recorded from around 19 degrees south to around 21 degrees south. This seems to corroborate the findings of Chulupka and Osmond, 1999, who recorded the majority of their limited sightings in the southern Great Barrier Reef, suggesting that the main breeding ground of the E1 population is around the Whitsundays Islands and the Pompey-Swains Reef Complex. This is further supported by Smith et al. 2012, who confirmed this area as a major wintering ground based on habitat modeling and satellite tag data. Next to the Great Barrier Reef, the nearby breeding ground of New Caledonia had the highest interchange index of breeding regions outside of East Australia, though the number of matches between Hervey Bay and New Caledonia, which already has a rather small catalogue, was markedly low compared to some of the other regions, which is interesting because, as you can see in the map, New Caledonia is the closest adjacent breeding ground to the Great Barrier Reef. And it would therefore be reasonable to think that a good number of whales would migrate between New Caledonia and Antarctic Area 5 along the east coast of Australia. However, previous studies have also found only 4 matches between East Australia and New Caledonia, and same-year movements between the two regions are yet to be successfully recorded. This supports previous conclusions that the level of interchange between New Caledonia and the Great Barrier Reef is low. But now we come to the most significant and most important finding of this study. Out of the breeding grounds in the East Oceania region that you can see on the map, just Tonga held the largest share of matches, 25 to be exact, while further away, 3 whales were matched to Niue and 2 to the Samoan Islands. Now, this is significant because previous reported connections between East Australia and breeding grounds east of New Caledonia were limited to just 1 photo ID match prior to 1999. More recently, Garrigue et al. 2011 found no direct connections between the East Australian population beyond New Caledonia, using photo identification from 1999 to 2004. After this, the only match recorded between the two regions was a genotype match made with Tonga by Steele et al. 2018. Therefore, this study makes what could be a significant change in existing knowledge of interchange between the East Australian coast and breeding grounds in East Oceania, using just a specific subset of the E1 population. And now for New Zealand's function as a migratory corridor by the Hervey Bay humpback whales. In this study, 50 whales were matched to New Zealand compared to just 3 in previous published studies. and New Zealand had the second highest interchange among all the regions with Hervey Bay, suggesting that a considerable number of whales passed through New Zealand on their way to the East Australian coast. Now, out of these 50 whales, 8 individuals were sighted passing through the Cook Strait and then subsequently sighted in Hervey Bay at least a month later the same year. Now, as you can see on the map on the left, Franklin et al. 2014 hypothesized on possible routes to different breeding grounds and feeding grounds that humpback whales may take passing through New Zealand. Using this as a guide, it can be speculated that the numerous whales sighted in the Cook Strait between May and October were heading to and from East Australia or New Caledonia. The 2 spotted near Fiordland in November were likely to be swimming from East Australia, while the single whale sighted at Kaikoura in October probably came from Tonga. Given these results and the results of previous studies, it is confirmed that New Zealand is a hub for different populations, including whales that use Hervey Bay. Now I shall tell you of my results regarding the sex differences in the migration patterns. Now, as you can see from this graph, the reds being females, the blues being males, and the grays being of unknown sex. In all breeding regions and migratory corridors, as well as the Antarctic feeding region, there were too few sexed whales for a proper analysis to prove whether there would be a bias towards one sex in interchange to other breeding grounds. Therefore, this study did not prove that there is a sex difference in migration patterns, which is surprising considering that the sample of sightings used in this study is connected to a subset of the E1 population that is known to be generally female. However, I would like to share with you details of one particular female whale. This whale was sighted at Hervey Bay in 1989, but then also sighted some years later in Tonga in 1994, 1996, and 1999. Now that's quite a change in destination. Or it could be that this particular female was not usually part of the E1 population. Rather, perhaps she's more usually a member of the E3 population that migrates to the East Oceania breeding grounds. Now, this could be an opportunity for future studies to determine whether there actually is a sex difference in migration patterns. And this could be addressed to an extent by combining photo identification and a greater use of genetic sampling. And now for the summary of the study's major findings. Clearly, as seen from the results, the majority of Hervey Bay humpback whales migrate to the Great Barrier Reef. But more importantly, there has been a change in current knowledge of interchange between East Australia and breeding grounds east of New Caledonia, with the substantial addition of matches between the two regions. Also, it is confirmed that Hervey Bay humpback whales use New Zealand occasionally as a migratory hub to the Great Barrier Reef, and other breeding regions. Now, some of you may ask, why does this study matter? Well, this study demonstrated that using photo identification, a cost-effective and non-invasive method, we were able to gain a wealth of information on the migratory patterns and destinations of these whales. And the results obtained in this study are mostly in line with the results found in previous studies that used more invasive methods such as satellite tagging. With more cooperation between various organizations and the establishment of more online databases in other regions, we could gain a better understanding of the structure of the different populations, make better estimates of abundance, and therefore make better population management policies regarding conservation. Now I would like to show my gratitude to the individuals and organizations that helped this project come to fruition. First off, to my supervisor, Dr. Daniele Cagnazzi, and my unit assessor, Professor Anya Sheffers, for giving me this opportunity, for their advice, and for keeping me on track over the course of this months-long project, even when facing difficulties with COVID towards the end. To Ted Cheeseman, Happy Whale CEO, for educating me on how online photo identification works, and his support in uploading and matching the Oceania project's massive fluke photo catalog. And let me tell you, without Ted's guidance and access to Happy Whale, I would have taken a lot longer than 2 months to complete this particular step. To the numerous organizations and programs that uploaded their images, which matched with the Oceania project's photos, and gave me permission to use their data. And last but certainly not least, to the founders of the Oceania project, Dr. Wally Franklin and the late but beloved Dr. Trish Franklin, for sharing their knowledge of humpback whale biology, and without whose extensive work and their resultant catalog, this project would not have been possible. This is the short list of the references that I directly refer to in this seminar.
Great, thank you very much.
And now I open the floor to you all for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Hansika. That was really interesting. I can see any hands for questions for this interesting seminar. I have a quick one, and you kind of showed some data later on in your talk, but you mentioned there were 4 whales that you identified were found around Tonga. And then in previous studies, they'd also identified 4 whales. Is there any way you can determine if they were the same 4 whales that were returning to that site?
So you mean to say New Caledonia, was it?
Sorry, New Caledonia, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it might, I think they might be the same. Oh, sorry, you mean the 4 whales. Sorry, you mean to say that the whales that I identified were the same 4 whales that they identified?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't look into that much detail about whether those were the same individuals, but it's I don't think it's highly likely that they'd be the same 4 individuals. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Stephen.
Steve, yeah.
Hi, Hansika. Lovely talk. I really enjoyed it. You spoke so well. So congratulations on the seminar. That was great.
Thanks, Steve.
The one thing that did surprise me a little bit when you mentioned it was your success rate of the matching. I do some matching of photos manually, and we go with a success rate. I think it has to be about 99.8% in order for us to say, yeah, that's a successful rate. But your success rate was 90%. So I'm just wondering, if you take that, that means if 90% success rate means a 10% rate of getting an incorrect match. And with 7,000 animals, that's 700 animals that were incorrectly matched, I suppose. I'm just going with that. So I'm just wondering whether some of those outliers that you're talking about, you know, the ones in Tonga and Niue and stuff like that, could they have been ones that were misidentified? And in which cases are you actually excluding some matches because you just really weren't certain? And did you check any of those manually?
Okay, so first off, about the 90% thing. So so basically what I gave you was the short version. The 90% was for those are for photos that are not of very high quality, but can still be identified. But when you get more when you get more high quality photos, then that goes more towards I think it was either 95 or 98% success rate. 90 is when you've got more on the lower end of quality of photos. And yeah, what were the other questions that you asked?
Well, you know, if you had one that was a bit of an outlier, would you check that manually and say, oh, look, that looks, you know, that one's way over there.
Okay,
you know, some of the ones from New Caledonia, for example.
Okay, so how the system that I worked with performs is that I uploaded these photos onto the database, and it uses a certain algorithm to match this photo with at least I think 5 proposed matches. So basically, I have to look through these potential matches and then pick the one that, you know, looks exactly the same, or, you know, or could be a match for this one, because sometimes you know, when it comes to identifying flukes, things can change. Some marks might disappear, or there might be a new mark, and things like that. And there were in a lot of instances where I had to reject all of those matches because none of them seemed likely, and so that could be, yeah, that could be a that could be a new whale. But most of the time it was a new whale, because if there were any photos that were like of really bad quality, then those wouldn't be considered. Yeah.
Thanks, Hansika. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Looks like we don't. I don't see anyone with their hand up. Well, thank you very much, Hansika. It was really interesting, and I really appreciate you volunteering to give a seminar. It's great that we have HDR students doing this. We'd like to see more.
No problem.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Bravo.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Please, those academics who have students, please make sure you let them know that we'd really appreciate them giving a seminar or even attending the seminar. Thanks, everyone. Bye.